And now to the engine of growth for any economy, small business. We've selected 3 bellwether businesses whose bosses have agreed to tell us how they're travelling at the moment. Aaron King is a car mechanic who runs a repair shop employing 5 people. Nina Moss has a furniture store and separate warehouse employing 7 staff. And Jen Dalitz left a career in finance and now works from a large office at home. She's hired by companies looking to progress women within their ranks. And she uses contractors. Welcome to you all.
Thanks, Tiggy.
Well, Jen Dalitz, can I start with you? Global economy in crisis, volatility in almost every market. How is that impacting you and your customers on the ground?
In 2 different ways, I guess, Tiggy. I work with large corporations who are investing in the women that work in their own organisations, and I also work with women who've left those environments and have started their own businesses. I'd say with the large companies I work with, there's a really big focus on cost reduction and on putting a lot of anything unnecessary on hold.
Now, is this something unnecessary? I mean, is getting women further up in the workforce seen as a discretionary item?
I think it's very much seen as a discretionary item, notwithstanding all the hype and what we see in the media about the need to do this.
So you as a consultant are, finding life much tougher?
Definitely. Definitely. It's seen as one of those items that could be put on hold.
Nina Moss, you run a furniture store. When it comes to consumer confidence, of course, we're hearing an awful lot about this. I see Myers CEO Bernie Brooks overnight at the World Retail Conference in Berlin. He says the confidence is probably the worst he's seen in 30 years. There's a lot of talk about gloom and doom. Is that reflecting in your sales?
Yes, certainly is. Yes. Even though I can say in my business, it can fluctuate from one week to the next.
So how do you manage that? Because what you're saying is your sales can be very different, literally week on week, are you?
Absolutely, absolutely. How I manage it, I do it with great difficulty, but I do manage it. And I put a lot more effort into my website. I have noticed that we are getting a lot more orders online now than we used to.
When you say sales are volatile, I mean, how much could they vary week on week?
They could definitely change up to 50% very easily. Yes, I mean, compared to this time last year, in the last few months, some months have been up 40% and other months have been down 20%. So there's a very significant difference. Yeah. But Moss Furniture has done pretty well given the climate, and I think it's because we don't have a lot of competition in the type of furniture that we do.
All right, well, Aaron King, completely different story in your business, and I know a few years ago during the GFC, you actually had better times. I mean, is that the case now?
Well, it is a little. It seems to spike upward as soon as there's any talk in the media of doom, gloom, share market crashes, etc., etc. So, but we're finding that this spike, it is only there for a while.
Let me take you back. Now, why is this happening? Is this because of people not going out and buying new cars?
I think so. I think so. I think there seems to be a link with a drop in new car sales and a rise in repairing their older cars. But they're not real old cars. They're like a few years old, but they seem to be a lot more prepared to spend the money on them and fix them. You might spend $1,000 to $2,000 on your older car at the most, whereas an outlay on a newer car is going to be $20,000. So it's obviously a lot cheaper to repair the old.
So consumers obviously changing patterns there. Now, what about the credit situation? Do you worry about bad debts in this sort of climate?
Not really. I don't really take any checks unless it's established clients. So I'm mainly taking credit cards and they're fairly safe. So I'm pretty well right with that. I still am asked for credit.
Safe for you, of course. I mean, the big question is, what does that do for the customer? Jen Dalitz, when it comes to, we're talking about credit, but when it comes to debt, interest rates, we thought at the beginning of the year we were going to look at interest rates ticking up. Now, of course, with the climate, that's changed, and if anything, they're going to tick down. Does that impact you and your business at all?
It doesn't. It doesn't directly impact the corporate work that I do. It does to a certain extent the small business clients I work with, because for them there's not so much delineation between what they make and spend in their business and what they make and spend in their household for the micro businesses. But I'd have to say on the credit side, most of my clients pay in advance for any advice that I give, and I've structured my business and my service packages that way in order to keep the administration down in my own business, so I don't have to be collecting on invoices after the fact.
And that's of course the big challenge for you getting the business in the first place.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Nina, coming to you, do you think that that interest rates, the change in the interest rate climate, has made a difference for spending at your shop?
Not really. I think the greatest difference really is what happens in the property market. That's what makes a difference in my business. So in the last year, I think property values have declined quite considerably, and that has a huge impact. And I think it's because people with their own homes feel that they're not as well off or not as wealthy as they once were.
What about employment, Nina? Because you employ staff, they're presumably quite highly trained staff. Yes. Have you got to the stage this year where you worry about keeping on those that you've got at the moment?
Not really, because I believe that a good customer service is critical, particularly for small business. And one can't really give great customer service unless there's enough staff. So I'm very reluctant to let anyone go. And I've got a fabulous team, so I wouldn't really know who to let go.
All right. Well, Jen, let me ask you about women in a downturn. How do women fare against men once the economy turns downwards?
That's interesting, and I'm seeing some quite negative impacts on women and their careers, which are associated with tight household incomes and with the rising cost of childcare. And I'm seeing that actually, I surveyed about 200 women to ask, what was the key factors for them in business and in their careers at the moment. The cost of childcare is the number one thing they say is impacting them and their careers. It's the number one expenditure for households outside of a mortgage. Households that have young children are paying, in many instances, more for their childcare than they are for their mortgages. And I'm seeing that it's impacting expansion of small business, it's impacting career progression of women who are employees. It's really tough.
Another factor, the Australian dollar. Aaron King, back up to parity pretty much today.
Yes. We've
had a strong Australian dollar coming through this year. How has that impacted you? I'm thinking of, genuine parts and things like that.
Yeah, well, look, I think it helps us, and I think it's all good. When it drops off, I think there's a feeling out there of when the Australian dollar is really strong, it's a positive. As for parts, they just seem to steadily rise. It's like anything else. It just continually goes up and there's no drop. If we have a drop, it just continually goes up.
Nina, must you agree? What's the Australian dollar done for you?
Yes, no, it's a good thing. When it's up, it's definitely a good thing for business. No doubt about that.
Nina, we've got a tax summit next week. There's been a lot of talk about bringing GST into the debate to consider whether it should be increased. Would that impact how much you sell if GST went up?
I'm certain it would. Would impact enormously.
And what about, Aaron, and your services?
Well, look, I think that we should not increase taxes,
Period.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
So absolutely not, no.
But I mean, if it was if it was a choice between income tax, other taxes, or a GST, which many people argue would at least broaden the tax base, you as a small business, it would hit you directly.
Yeah, if there was a relevant drop in income tax and other taxes, I might be for it. I'd have to look at it further. But I think, yes.
Jen Delitz, let me ask you about the carbon tax, which has been the big political football this year. Now, is it true from your point of view that the last thing that you need is a great big carbon tax? Do you buy the opposition's mantra on this?
Yeah, I do. I don't think it's the right time for a carbon tax. I agree with Aaron. I don't think it's time to increase taxes. I think businesses are doing it pretty tough at the moment, and it's not the right timing.
Do you worry, Aaron King, about the current state of leadership in the country, and the fact that we've got a lot of independents and Greens who are driving a lot of the policy?
I do. I think at the moment we've lost our way, but it's not only the government's fault. Obviously, there's things around the world which are huge, but we need to have some strong economic leadership here, as we had in the recent past.
Nina Moss, carbon tax.
Yes, no, I agree with Aaron and Jen. I think it's definitely the wrong time, and I think it has a huge psychological impact on people, just the word tax alone, even if people are not aware of exactly how much more it's going to cost them. It may be minimal, but nevertheless it has a huge impact.
So, Jen Dallas, if, for instance, the government between now and the election did do a backflip on the carbon tax and said, look, it's just not the time, we're still committed to bringing it in, but not before the election, could that change your mind about how you felt about the government?
Yes, it would. That would be more in line with the government that was elected. And I think that the initial backflip to introduce the carbon tax, it hasn't been well received, and it's partly because it's not what was promised, and it certainly would change my perception.
Stranger things have happened. I'd like to thank you all for coming in and joining us today.
Thanks, Tiggy.
Thank you.
Thank you.